The sleek silver taxi glided through the bustling streets of Chicago, carrying precious cargo. Zara Phoenix gazed out the window, her dark eyes reflecting the towering skyscrapers that had once been so familiar. 6 years had passed since she'd last set foot in this city, and now she was back, with a purpose that burned deep within her soul. Beside her, the two most important people in her life sat quietly, their young faces a perfect blend of curiosity and apprehension. Atlas and Orion, her twin prodigies, were about to embark on a new chapter of their lives, one they couldn't possibly understand the full implications of. As the taxi pulled up to the imposing glass and steel structure of Ashcroft Medical, Zara took a deep breath. This was it, the first step in her carefully orchestrated plan for revenge. "Come on, boys," she said softly, ushering the twins out of the car. They looked up at the building in awe, their identical hazel eyes wide with wonder. Zara's heels clicked against the polished marble floor as they entered the lobby. She could feel the eyes of the staff and visitors upon them, curiosity piqued by the new arrivals. But it was another building that caught her attention, the headquarters of her ex-husband's company, visible in the distance through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Kingston Drake, the man who had betrayed her, stolen her research, and driven her out of Chicago 6 years ago. He had no idea she was back, and that thought brought a small, satisfied smile to Zara's lips. The elevator whisked them up to the executive floor, where Victoria Ashcroft was waiting. The statuesque blonde greeted Zara with a knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "Dr. Phoenix," Victoria purred, extending her hand. "Welcome to Ashcroft Medical. We're thrilled to have you on board as our new director of neurosurgery." Zara shook her hand firmly, meeting Victoria's gaze with steady determination. "Thank you, Ms. Ashcroft. I'm looking forward to bringing my expertise to your team." As Victoria led them on a tour of the facilities, Zara's mind raced. Did Victoria know more than she let on? The woman's enigmatic smile and carefully chosen words hinted at hidden depths. Finally, they arrived at Zara's new office. It was spacious and modern, with a breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline. As Victoria excused herself, Zara began to unpack, carefully placing a framed photo of the twins on her desk. Atlas and Orion, unable to contain their excitement any longer, began exploring the high-tech equipment scattered around the room. Their innate understanding of complex technology never ceased to amaze Zara. "Mom, can we check out the rest of the hospital?" Orion asked, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. Zara hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but stay together and don't touch anything without permission. I'll come find you soon." As the boys scampered off, Zara allowed herself a moment of reflection. She closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back in time, 6 years ago, tears streaming down her face as she boarded a plane with her infant sons, leaving behind everything she had ever known. The memory steeled her resolve. She was here now, and she would make Kingston pay for what he had done. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. James Carter, her former mentor, stood in the doorway, a mix of surprise and warmth on his weathered face. "Zara," he said softly, disbelief coloring his tone. "Is it really you?" She smiled, genuine affection breaking through her carefully constructed facade. "Hello, Dr. Carter. It's been a long time." They embraced, and Zara felt a pang of guilt for not having contacted him all these years. As they caught up, she could see the questions in his eyes, but he didn't pry. Instead, he simply said, "Whatever brought you back, I'm glad you're here. And don't worry, your secret is safe with me." Grateful for his discretion, Zara thanked him and promised to catch up properly soon. As he left, she turned her attention to the task at hand. She pulled out a USB drive, quickly accessing confidential files on Kingston's latest research. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the information. He was still building on her original work, but he was stagnating without her brilliance to guide him. Meanwhile, Atlas and Orion had made their way to the hospital's IT department. The staff watched in amazement as the young boys effortlessly navigated complex systems, even suggesting improvements to the hospital's cybersecurity protocols. As the day wore on, Zara found herself standing by the window, gazing at Kingston's company headquarters. Her phone buzzed with a mysterious call, but she ignored it, her mind focused on the challenge ahead. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Dr. Jasmine Reynolds watching her from the end of the hallway, a flash of recognition crossing her face. As Zara gathered her things to leave for the day, mentally preparing for the next phase of her plan, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Welcome back, Mrs. Drake. Or should I say, Dr. Phoenix?" Zara's heart raced as she faced Jasmine in the hospital corridor, her mind scrambling for a response. The confrontation she had dreaded since her return to Chicago was now unfolding before her eyes. "Dr. Reynolds," Zara said, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "I'm afraid you must be mistaken. My name is Dr. Phoenix, and I've never been married." Jasmine's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "Come now, Zara. Let's not play games. I'd recognize those eyes anywhere, even after all these years." Zara glanced around, ensuring no one else was within earshot. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private," she suggested, gesturing towards an empty consultation room. Once inside, Zara's composure faltered. "How did you know?" Jasmine leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. "I've worked with Kingston for years. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize his ex-wife and the mother of his children?" Zara's eyes widened. "Please, Jasmine. No one can know I'm back, especially not Kingston. My children's safety depends on it." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "And what's in it for me if I keep your secret?" Before Zara could respond, her phone buzzed with a reminder. The medical conference was about to begin, and she was the keynote speaker. "We'll continue this later," she said, hurrying out of the room. As Zara entered the conference hall, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was her moment to showcase years of hard work, but the weight of her secret identity pressed heavily on her shoulders. The auditorium was packed with medical professionals, investors, and press. Zara took a deep breath as she was introduced, stepping onto the stage with practiced confidence. As she began her presentation on the revolutionary neural interface system, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Kingston Drake sat in the front row, his expression a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Zara's voice remained steady as she explained the intricacies of her invention, demonstrating its potential to revolutionize neurosurgery. The audience was captivated, hanging on her every word. However, as she prepared for the live demonstration, Zara noticed something was amiss. The equipment wasn't responding as it should. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as she realized someone was attempting to sabotage her presentation. From the corner of her eye, she saw Kingston smirking, his hand discreetly holding a small device. Zara's heart sank as she realized he was behind the sabotage. Just as she was about to abort the demonstration, she caught sight of Atlas and Orion in the wings of the stage. The twins exchanged a meaningful look before Atlas pulled out a tablet and began furiously typing. Within seconds, the malfunctioning equipment came back to life. Orion gave his mother a subtle thumbs up, and Zara's confidence surged. She continued the demonstration flawlessly, showcasing the full potential of her neural interface system. The audience erupted in applause as Zara concluded her presentation. Investors swarmed the stage, eager to discuss potential partnerships. Kingston stormed out of the auditorium, his face contorted with fury as he made a hushed phone call. As the crowd dispersed, Jasmine approached Zara once more. "Impressive show," she whispered. "But remember, I still hold your secret. We'll talk terms soon." Zara nodded, her victory feeling somewhat hollow under the weight of Jasmine's threat. She made her way to Atlas and Orion, pulling them into a tight embrace. "You were amazing," she said, her voice a mixture of pride and concern. "But how did you know what to do?" Atlas grinned. "We've been studying your research, Mom. We knew something was wrong and figured out how to counter it." Orion chimed in, "Yeah, it was just a simple firewall breach. Child's play, really." Zara's heart swelled with pride, but a nagging worry persisted. Her children's exceptional abilities were both a blessing and a potential danger in this high-stakes game she was playing. As Zara accepted congratulations from colleagues and investors, she noticed Victoria Ashcroft observing her from across the room. The enigmatic CEO of Ashcroft Medical wore an unreadable expression, and Zara couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria knew more than she let on. The conference hall had nearly emptied when Victoria finally approached Zara. "Dr. Phoenix," she said, her voice low and measured. "A word, if you please." Victoria led Zara to a quiet corner, away from prying ears. Zara's pulse quickened, anticipating another confrontation about her true identity. "Impressive performance, Zara," Victoria said, her use of the name causing Zara's breath to catch. "But don't worry, your secret is safe with me for now." Zara stared at Victoria, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over her. As she opened her mouth to respond, she realized that in this game of secrets and power, she was far from being the only player. The real challenge was only just beginning. Zara's heart raced as Victoria's words hung in the air. The revelation that her identity was known sent a chill down her spine. She had underestimated Victoria Ashcroft, and now she found herself trapped in a dangerous game of chess. "How long have you known?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victoria's lips curled into an enigmatic smile. "Long enough, Dr. Phoenix. Or should I say, Mrs. Drake? Your secret is safe with me for now." The two women stood in Victoria's opulent office, the Chicago skyline stretching out behind them. Zara's mind raced, trying to calculate her next move. She had come so far, sacrificed so much. She couldn't let her plans unravel now. "What do you want?" Zara asked, her eyes narrowing. Victoria circled her desk, running her fingers along the polished wood. "For now, nothing. I'm curious to see how this plays out." "You've certainly stirred things up around here, Zara." "It's been refreshing." As Zara left Victoria's office, her mind drifted back to the past. The memories flooded in, sharp and painful. 6 years ago, Zara stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching Kingston pack his bags. Her world was crumbling around her. "How could you?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "How could you betray me like this?" Kingston didn't even look at her as he zipped up his suitcase. "It's business, Zara. You wouldn't understand." "Business?" Zara's voice cracked. "You stole my research, my life's work, and you call it business?" Kingston finally turned to face her, his eyes cold and distant. "I did what I had to do. The company needed that breakthrough. You were too slow, too cautious. I made the right call." Zara's hand instinctively went to her swollen belly, where their unborn twins nestled. "And what about us? What about our family?" Kingston's gaze softened for a moment, but then the mask slipped back into place. "I'm sorry, Zara, but this is bigger than us. The world needs this technology." As he walked out the door, Zara's heart shattered. She knew then that she would do whatever it took to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Back in the present, Zara shook off the painful memories and made her way to the research lab. She found Atlas and Orion there, their young faces alight with excitement as they explored the cutting-edge equipment. "Mom," Atlas called out, "this place is amazing. Look at this neural interface system." Orion was already tinkering with a complex-looking machine. "I think I can improve the efficiency of this by at least 30%, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Zara couldn't help but smile, despite the weight of her worries. Her boys were truly extraordinary, their minds operating on a level that sometimes left even her in awe. Meanwhile, across town, Kingston Drake sat in his sleek office, his brow furrowed as he stared at a collection of photos and documents spread across his desk. The mysterious new neurosurgeon at Ashcroft Medical had been occupying his thoughts for days now. "There's something familiar about her," he muttered, studying a grainy security camera image of Zara entering the hospital. His assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, the board is ready for you." Kingston nodded, gathering the documents into a folder. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. Back at Ashcroft Medical, Zara was in the operating theater, performing a complex neurosurgery. Her hands moved with practiced precision, her mind focused solely on the delicate task before her. This was where she felt most at home, most herself. As she finished the procedure, a round of applause broke out among the observing medical staff. Zara allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. She was back where she belonged, at the forefront of medical innovation. That evening, Victoria hosted a lavish dinner for potential investors. Zara found herself seated at the head table, fielding questions about her groundbreaking research. Dr. Phoenix, a distinguished-looking man asked, "Your work on neural interfaces is truly revolutionary. How do you see this technology evolving in the next 5 years?" Zara launched into an impassioned explanation, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. As she spoke, she could see the investors leaning in, captivated by her vision of the future. Across the room, Victoria watched with a calculating gaze. She raised her glass in a silent toast to Zara, a gesture that went unnoticed by the others but sent a clear message. The game was still on. Later that night, as Zara prepared to leave the hospital, she received an alert on her phone. Atlas's voice came through, tinged with urgency. "Mom, someone's trying to access your confidential files. Orion and I are blocking them, but they're good. Really good." Zara's blood ran cold. "Can you trace it?" There was a pause, filled with the sound of rapid typing. It's coming from Drake Pharmaceuticals, Mom. It's him." Zara's jaw clenched. Of course, it was Kingston. He must suspect something by now. "Lock it down, boys. Use that new firewall you've been working on." "Already on it," Orion's voice chimed in. "He won't get through this." As Zara made her way home, her mind raced. She needed advice, someone she could trust. There was only one person who came to mind. The next day, Zara met Dr. Carter in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. Her old mentor listened intently as she outlined her situation, careful to omit certain details. "You're playing a dangerous game, Zara," Dr. Carter said softly. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Zara nodded, her eyes steely with determination. "I have to see this through, Carter. For the twins, for myself, for everything that was taken from me." Dr. Carter sighed, placing a comforting hand on hers. "Just be careful. Kingston Drake is not a man to be underestimated." As if on cue, Zara's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know you're here. We need to talk. Kay." Zara's heart pounded as she showed the message to Dr. Carter. The older doctor's face grew grave. "Whatever you decide to do next, Zara, know that I'm here for you." That evening, as Zara approached her apartment, she noticed something out of place. A manila envelope sat propped against her door, unmarked and mysterious. With trembling hands, Zara picked up the envelope and went inside. She poured herself a glass of wine, trying to calm her nerves before opening it. Inside, she found a collection of old photographs. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized herself in Kingston, smiling and happy in a time that felt like a lifetime ago. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note. "I know who you really are. Meet me tomorrow at the park at 10 a.m., or everyone will know." Zara's hands shook as she read the note, her mind reeling with the implications. Her carefully constructed plan was starting to unravel, and she felt the walls closing in around her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Tomorrow would be a turning point, one way or another. Zara's heart raced as she approached the park, her eyes darting around nervously. The crisp morning air did little to calm her nerves as she searched for the mysterious sender of the envelope. As she rounded a bend in the path, she spotted a familiar face, Dr. Marcus, a former colleague who had worked alongside Kingston years ago. "Hello, Zara," Marcus said, his voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "It's been a long time." Zara's mind flashed back to their days working together in the lab. The camaraderie they once shared now replaced by tension and unspoken accusations. "Marcus," she replied cautiously. "I assume you're the one who sent the envelope." He nodded, his expression grave. "I couldn't stand by and watch this unfold without saying something. Kingston, he's not the man you think he is." As Marcus began to reveal the depths of Kingston's deceptions, Zara felt a mixture of vindication and renewed anger. Her suspicions had been correct all along, but the extent of Kingston's betrayal was even greater than she had imagined. Meanwhile, across town, Kingston sat in his opulent office, staring at the final confirmation of Zara's identity. His face contorted with a mix of rage and shock as he realized the full implications of her return. He slammed his fist on the desk, causing his assistant to jump. "Give me our legal team," he barked. "Now!" Back at Ashcroft Medical, Atlas and Orion were exploring a restricted area of the hospital, their innate curiosity getting the better of them. As they marveled at the advanced equipment, they nearly collided with a tall, imposing figure rounding the corner. Kingston's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the two boys. There was something eerily familiar about them, a nagging sensation he couldn't shake. "Well, hello there," he said, his voice unnaturally smooth. "Are you two lost?" Atlas and Orion exchanged a quick glance, their twin bond allowing for silent communication. There was something about this man that set off alarm bells in their prodigious minds. Before they could respond, Zara appeared, her face a mask of panic as she quickly ushered the boys away. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Drake," she said, her voice tight. "They won't be wandering around again." Kingston's eyes narrowed as he watched them leave, his suspicions growing by the second. He made his way to Zara's office, barging in without knocking. "I know who you are," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "And I will not let you destroy everything I've built." Zara stood her ground, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You destroyed it yourself, Kingston. I'm just here to pick up the pieces." As Kingston stormed out, Zara's phone buzzed with a notification. Her heart sank as she read the legal notice, effectively barring her from using her research. She slumped into her chair, feeling the weight of her challenges pressing down on her. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of concern. "I heard about the legal notice," she said, stepping into the office. "Don't worry, Zara. We'll fight this together." But behind her sympathetic smile, a calculating gleam shone in her eyes. Across the hospital, Atlas and Orion had retreated to a quiet corner, their fingers flying across their tablets as they hacked into the hospital system. "There's something weird about that, Dr. Drake," Atlas muttered. "I want to know more." Orion nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the data flowing across the screen. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a file. "There's a lot of redacted information about him and Mom from years ago." As the twins delved deeper into the mystery surrounding their mother and the enigmatic Dr. Drake, Jasmine Reynolds observed from afar, her mind working overtime as she plotted her next move in this high-stakes game. Zara, feeling the walls closing in, sought out Dr. Carter for advice. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you know, Zara, and you're not alone in this fight." As the day drew to a close, Kingston made a mysterious phone call, a malicious smile spreading across his face. "Everything is in motion," he said to the person on the other end. "Soon, Zara Phoenix will wish she had never returned to Chicago." Later that evening, as Zara tried to calm the twins after their encounter with Kingston, Atlas looked up at her, his young face serious beyond his years. "Mom," he asked, his voice quivering slightly, "who is that man really? Why did he look at us that way?" Zara sat on the couch, her children's eager eyes fixed upon her. Atlas's question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. She took a deep breath, her mind racing to find the right words. How could she explain the complexity of her past with Kingston without shattering their innocence? "That man," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "is someone I used to work with a long time ago. We had our differences." Atlas and Orion exchanged glances, clearly unsatisfied with the vague response. Zara's heart ached, knowing that one day she would have to reveal the whole truth. But not today, not when her plans were so precariously balanced. As she tucked the twins in a bed that night, memories of the past flooded her mind. 6 years ago, she had stood in Kingston's office, her world crumbling around her as she discovered his betrayal. The research they had worked on together for years, the breakthrough that could change the face of neurosurgery. He had claimed it all as his own, erasing her contributions entirely. "You'll never work in this field again," Kingston had sneered, his face twisted with cruel triumph. "Who would believe you over me?" Zara shook off the painful memory, focusing on the present. The next morning, she found herself in a tense meeting with the Ashcroft medical legal team. The mood was somber as they discussed Kingston's latest move to block her research. "He's claiming all your work was done under his company's umbrella," the lead lawyer explained, his brow furrowed. "It's going to be an uphill battle, Dr. Phoenix." Zara clenched her fists under the table. We'll fight this. I won't let him take my life's work away from me again. As the meeting dragged on, across the city, Atlas and Orion sat huddled over a computer in their room. Their fingers flew across the keyboard as they delved deeper into the digital realm, searching for information about the mysterious Kingston Drake. "Look at this," Atlas whispered, pointing to an old news article. "He won the Meyer Prize for Neuroscience Innovation 5 years ago." Orion leaned in, his eyes widening. "Wasn't that around the time Mom left Chicago?" The twins shared a knowing look, their young minds connecting dots they weren't yet ready to fully understand. Meanwhile, Zara was preparing for a high-risk surgery using her neural interface system. As she scrubbed in, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her stomach. This operation could make or break her career at Ashcroft Medical. What she didn't know was that danger lurked just outside the operating room. Kingston, disguised in scrubs and a surgical mask, slipped into the control room unnoticed. His eyes gleamed with malicious intent as he approached the main console. Dr. Carter, passing by on his rounds, noticed something odd about the figure hunched over the controls. Trusting his instincts, he followed, his heart racing as he recognized Kingston's distinctive posture. Inside the operating room, Zara was fully focused on her patient, her hands steady as she navigated the complex neural pathways displayed on her interface. She was oblivious to the drama unfolding just beyond the doors. Kingston's fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to input the commands that would sabotage the entire system. But before he could strike, Dr. Carter burst into the room. "Stop right there, Kingston," he shouted, lunging forward. The two men grappled fiercely, their struggle threatening to disrupt the delicate equipment. Alarms began to blare, and Zara looked up in confusion as her interface flickered. "What's happening?" she demanded, fighting to maintain control of the situation. In the control room, Dr. Carter managed to overpower Kingston, slamming his hand down on the emergency override button. The system stabilized, and Zara breathed a sigh of relief as she regained full control. With renewed focus, she completed the surgery flawlessly. As the final sutures were placed, applause erupted from the observing medical team. Zara smiled behind her mask, the rush of success momentarily overshadowing her concerns. As she exited the operating room, she was met by a breathless Dr. Carter. "Zara, there's something you need to know," he began, but was cut off by the approach of the hospital security team. "Dr. Carter, we need your statement about the intruder," one of the guards said urgently. Zara looked between them, confusion evident on her face. "Intruder? What intruder?" Dr. Carter squeezed her arm reassuringly. "I'll explain everything later. Just know that your surgery was a complete success, despite certain complications." As the adrenaline of the operation wore off, Zara found herself surrounded by her grateful team, accepting their congratulations with a mixture of pride and lingering bewilderment. What had really happened during her surgery? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, momentarily distracting her from the celebration. She pulled it out, her blood running cold as she read the message on the screen. "Congratulations on your success, darling. But remember, I always win in the end. K." Zara's heart raced as she read the message on her phone, a mix of fear and determination washing over her. Kingston's words echoed in her mind. "Congratulations on your success, darling. But remember, I always win in the end. K." She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the battles to come. Across town, in the sleek boardroom of Drake Medical Technologies, Kingston Drake paced back and forth, his face a mask of barely contained fury. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they delivered the news he dreaded to hear. "Mr. Drake, we can't ignore the fact that investors are jumping ship," one of the board members said, his voice tinged with concern. "Ashcroft Medical's new neural interface technology is drawing significant attention and capital." Kingston slammed his fist on the polished mahogany table, causing several board members to flinch. "We've been at the forefront of medical technology for years. How can they suddenly overtake us?" As if to answer his question, a large flat screen on the wall flickered to life, showing a news report. The anchor's voice filled the room. "In a groundbreaking move, Victoria Ashcroft has announced an exclusive partnership with major hospitals across the country, implementing Dr. Zara Phoenix's revolutionary neural interface technology. This deal is expected to revolutionize patient care and surgical procedures. Kingston's face contorted with rage as he watched the report, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the table. The board members exchanged worried glances, sensing the impending storm. Meanwhile, at a glittering corporate event, Zara found herself surrounded by admiring investors and medical professionals. Her cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and embarrassment as she fielded compliments and partnership proposals. Dr. Phoenix, your work is truly groundbreaking, gushed a silver-haired investor, shaking her hand enthusiastically. We'd be honored to back your future projects. As Zara navigated the sea of admirers, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. Her plan was working better than she had ever imagined. The empire she had helped Kingston build was now crumbling, and she was rising from its ashes. Unbeknownst to Zara, Atlas and Orion were exploring the depths of Ashcroft Medical's research labs. Their eyes widened with wonder as they took in the advanced equipment and cutting-edge technology surrounding them. "This is incredible," Atlas whispered, his fingers hovering over a holographic display of the human brain. "Mom's work is light years ahead of anything we've seen before." Orion nodded in agreement, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Imagine what we could do with this tech, bro. The advancements we could make." Their exploration was cut short by the sound of running footsteps and panicked voices. Curious, the twins made their way to the main lobby, where a crowd had gathered around a large screen. The news anchor's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. In a shocking turn of events, Kingston Drake, CEO of Drake Medical Technologies, has called an emergency press conference. We go live to the scene. The camera cut to Kingston, standing at a podium, his face a mask of determination. "I've called this press conference to address the recent success of Ashcroft Medical and to reveal a truth that has been hidden for far too long," he began, his voice steady. Dr. Zara Phoenix, the brilliant mind behind their new neural interface technology, is not who she claims to be. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd at Ashcroft Medical. Atlas and Orion exchanged worried glances, their hearts pounding. Kingston continued, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and triumph. "Dr. Phoenix is in fact my ex-wife, and the two prodigies working alongside her? They're our children, my children." The twins felt the world tilt beneath their feet. Everything they thought they knew suddenly shattered like glass. Their eyes darted around the lobby, searching for their mother, desperate for an explanation. Zara burst through the hospital doors, her face pale with shock and fear. Her eyes locked onto her sons, and she saw the confusion and hurt etched across their faces. Tears welled up in her eyes as she rushed towards them, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "Atlas, Orion," she choked out, reaching for them. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this." But the twins stepped back, their eyes filled with a mix of betrayal and disbelief. "Is it true?" Atlas demanded, his voice cracking. "Is he really our father?" Zara's silence was all the confirmation they needed. Orion shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "Why didn't you tell us? How could you keep this from us?" As Zara struggled to find the words to explain, to make her sons understand, she felt the weight of her past and her choices bearing down on her. The revenge she had sought for so long suddenly seemed hollow in the face of her children's pain. The buzz of her phone cut through the tense silence. With trembling hands, Zara pulled it out, dreading what she might see. Kingston's voice seemed to echo in her mind as she read his message. "Meet me at the hospital in an hour. We're going to discuss custody of the children." Zara's heels echoed through the hospital corridor as she strode towards the inevitable confrontation with Kingston. Her heart raced, but her face remained a mask of determination. As she rounded the corner, she saw him standing in the lobby, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Zara, darling," Kingston drawled, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "So nice of you to join me." She didn't dignify his greeting with a response. Instead, she walked right up to him, her eyes blazing. "Let's get one thing straight, Kingston. You will not take my children away from me." Kingston's smile faltered for a moment before he regained his composure. Our children, Zara. Or have you forgotten that little detail? The argument that ensued was explosive. Their voices, though hushed, carried the weight of years of resentment and betrayal. Nurses and patients alike gave them a wide berth, sensing the tension radiating from the pair. You have no right, Zara hissed. You gave up that right when you chose your ambition over your family. Kingston's face darkened. I made mistakes, I admit that, but I'm their father, and I have every right to be part of their lives. As they argued, Zara's mind flashed back to happier times. She remembered the day the twins were born, tiny and perfect. She recalled Kingston's face, filled with wonder and love as he held them for the first time. The memory was a dagger to her heart, a reminder of what they had lost. Unbeknownst to the warring parents, Atlas had hacked into the hospital's security system. In a quiet corner of the building, he and Orion listened intently to the heated exchange, their young faces etched with concern and confusion. I can't believe this, Orion whispered, his eyes wide. Daddy really did all those things? Atlas nodded grimly, his fingers flying over his tablet as he dug deeper into the hospital's archives. There's more, Orion. Look at this. The twins pored over old documents, piecing together the story of their parents' joint research and subsequent falling out. With each revelation, their understanding of the situation grew, along with their determination to help their mother. Meanwhile, in her plush office, Victoria Ashcroft was orchestrating her own plan. Surrounded by advisors, she outlined her strategy to use the scandal to her advantage. This is our opportunity, she said, her voice cool and calculated. With both Zara and Kingston distracted by their personal drama, we can move in and absorb both companies. The board won't have a choice but to agree once they see the numbers. Back in the hospital lobby, Dr. Carter had arrived, attempting to mediate between Zara and Kingston. His presence seemed to calm the situation slightly, but the underlying tension remained palpable. Please, both of you, Dr. Carter implored. Think about what's best for Atlas and Orion. This public spectacle isn't doing anyone any favors. Kingston scoffed. What's best for them is to have their father in their lives. Zara's been keeping them from me for years, because you're a manipulative, self-serving bastard. Zara snapped, her composure finally cracking. As the argument raged on, Jasmine Reynolds watched from a distance, scribbling notes in a small notebook. Her eyes darted between Zara, Kingston, and Dr. Carter, missing nothing. In their hidden corner, Atlas and Orion had made a startling discovery. Look at this, Atlas, Orion said, pointing to a document on the screen. Mom's original research. Dad took credit for it. He stole her work? Atlas's face hardened. We need to show this to Mom. She needs to know the truth. While Zara fought for her children in the lobby, Victoria was putting her plan into motion. In an emergency board meeting, she presented her proposal for a merger. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice smooth as silk. In light of recent events, I believe we have a unique opportunity to strengthen our position in the market. Zara's phone buzzed with a message from her assistant, informing her of Victoria's sudden board meeting. The realization of Victoria's betrayal hit her like a physical blow. She felt the walls closing in, her carefully laid plans crumbling around her. Exhausted and emotionally drained, Zara finally managed to extricate herself from the confrontation with Kingston. She made her way home, her mind racing with the day's events and the uncertain future that lay ahead. As she opened the door to her apartment, she found Atlas and Orion waiting for her. Their faces were set with a determination that mirrored her own, and for a moment, she saw herself in them. The same stubborn resolve, the same fierce intelligence. Mom, Atlas said, his voice steady. We need to talk. We know what really happened between you and Dad, and we have a plan to fix all of this. Zara looked at her children, a mixture of pride and apprehension washing over her. These brilliant, perceptive children had uncovered the truth she had tried so hard to protect them from. Yet in their eyes, she saw not judgment or anger, but understanding and a desire to help. She sank into a chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the past 6 years pressing down on her. All right, she said softly. Tell me everything. Atlas stood up, looking firmly at Zara. Mom, we know what really happened between you and Dad, and we have a plan to fix all of this. Atlas's words hung in the air, their weight palpable as Zara stared at her children in disbelief. The twins' determined expressions bore into her, a mix of intelligence and resolve that both frightened and amazed her. What do you mean? Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Atlas and Orion exchanged a glance before Orion spoke up. We've been doing some digging, Mom. We know about the research you and Dad did together, about the patents, about everything. Zara felt her heart racing. She had tried so hard to protect them from the ugly truth. But here they were, 2 steps ahead of her. She sank into the nearest chair, gesturing for the twins to continue. Over the next hour, Atlas and Orion laid out everything they had discovered. They had hacked into old servers, pieced together fragments of information, and even created algorithms to decrypt long-forgotten files. As they spoke, Zara's mind flashed back to the countless nights she had spent working on those very projects, side by side with Kingston, before it all fell apart. But that's not all, Atlas said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. We have a plan to expose Dad and get back what's rightfully yours. Zara listened intently as the twins outlined their strategy. Atlas explained how he could infiltrate Kingston's current servers, exploiting vulnerabilities he had discovered. Orion, meanwhile, had developed a device that could bypass even the most sophisticated security systems. It's risky, Zara said, her brow furrowed with concern. If you get caught. We won't, Orion assured her, his confidence unwavering. We've thought of everything, Mom. Trust us. As the twins continued to explain their plan, Zara couldn't help but feel a surge of pride mixed with her apprehension. These were her children, brilliant beyond measure, using their gifts to fight for justice. Yet, the mother and her worried about the dangers they might face. While Zara grappled with her decision, across town, Victoria and Kingston were having a clandestine meeting of their own. In a dimly lit corner of an upscale restaurant, the 2 conspirators huddled close, their voices low. We need to act fast, Kingston hissed, his usual composure slipping. Zara's gaining too much ground. Victoria nodded, a cold smile playing on her lips. Don't worry, Kingston. I have a few tricks up my sleeve. By this time tomorrow, Zara Phoenix will be nothing but a distant memory in the medical world. Back at Zara's home, she had finally made her decision. All right, she said, looking at her children with a mix of pride and trepidation. We'll do it your way, but promise me you'll be careful. The twins nodded solemnly and immediately set to work. Atlas began the intricate process of bypassing Kingston's security protocols, his fingers flying over the keyboard with inhuman speed. Orion, meanwhile, calibrated his device, preparing it for the data extraction they would need. As the night wore on, Zara found herself in the strange position of being the distraction. She engaged Kingston in a series of lengthy discussions about custody arrangements, keeping him occupied while her children worked their magic behind the scenes. Atlas's eyes widened as he stumbled upon a treasure trove of incriminating documents. Falsified research data, manipulated clinical trial results, even evidence of bribery. It was all there, hidden away in Kingston's personal files. Orion, look at this, Atlas whispered, gesturing his brother over. Orion's jaw dropped as he scanned the documents. We've got him, Orion breathed, a mixture of shock and triumph in his voice. As the twins worked, carefully covering their tracks and creating false leads to protect their activities, the outside world continued to shift. Victoria, true to her word, had begun to leak damaging information about Kingston to the press. The once untouchable medical tycoon found himself besieged from all sides, his carefully constructed empire beginning to crumble. In a panic, Kingston called emergency meetings with his board, his lawyers, anyone who might be able to stem the tide of bad press. But with each passing hour, his options dwindled. Finally, as dawn broke, Atlas and Orion completed their mission. They had gathered a comprehensive dossier of evidence against Kingston, documenting years of fraud, theft, and unethical practices. With trembling hands, they compiled everything and sent it to Zara's secure email. Zara's phone buzzed, and she excused herself from her latest call with Kingston. Opening the email, She felt a rush of emotions: relief, vindication, and a fierce pride in her children. Years of pain and injustice could finally be put to rest. As she scrolled through the damning evidence, another notification popped up on her screen. It was a message from Dr. Carter. "I've heard rumors. Whatever you're planning, I'm with you. I'll testify if needed." It's time Kingston faced the consequences of his actions. Zara felt a lump form in her throat. After all these years, she wasn't alone in this fight anymore. She had her brilliant children, she had allies, and now she had the truth. As she stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun streaming through the windows, Zara's phone buzzed once more. This time, it was an urgent message from Victoria. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Come prepared to fight for your future." Zara stood before the mirror, her reflection a mix of determination and apprehension. She smoothed down her impeccably tailored suit, an armor of sorts for the battle ahead. Atlas and Orion sat on her bed, surrounded by tablets and printouts, their young faces creased with concentration. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Atlas asked, his eyes never leaving the screen before him. Zara turned to her sons, a small smile playing on her lips. "As sure as I'll ever be. You've done incredible work, both of you. Now it's my turn to finish what we started." She picked up the leather portfolio containing the damning evidence against Kingston, feeling its weight in her hands. It represented years of pain, deceit, and now, finally, the promise of justice. As Zara's car pulled up to Ashcroft Medical, she saw Kingston striding confidently towards the entrance, his trademark smirk firmly in place. If only he knew what awaited him inside those glass doors. Victoria Ashcroft was already in the boardroom, meticulously arranging place cards and water glasses. Her eyes gleamed with an enigmatic light as she surveyed her handiwork. Everything was falling into place, just as she had planned. One by one, the board members filed in, their hushed whispers and furtive glances betraying the tension in the air. This was no ordinary meeting, and everyone knew it. Zara took a deep breath before pushing open the heavy oak doors. All eyes turned to her as she entered, her heels clicking purposefully against the polished floor. Kingston's smirk faltered for a moment as he took in her resolute expression. "Shall we begin?" Victoria's voice cut through the silence, a hint of anticipation coloring her tone. Kingston wasted no time in launching his attack. "Before we proceed, I think it's important to address the elephant in the room. Dr. Phoenix, or should I say, Mrs. Drake, has been operating under false pretenses. Her presence here is nothing short of corporate espionage." Zara remained calm, her voice steady as she responded. "I think you'll find, Kingston, that there's much more to this story than you're letting on." She opened her portfolio, spreading out a series of documents across the table. "These are records of fraudulent activities carried out under your leadership, dating back years." The room erupted in murmurs as board members leaned in to examine the evidence. Kingston's face paled visibly. As Zara continued her presentation, flashes of the past played through her mind. The late nights in the lab, the stolen kisses, the moment she discovered his betrayal. Each memory fueled her resolve. Victoria attempted to regain control of the meeting, her carefully laid plans beginning to unravel. "While these allegations are serious, we must consider the source. Dr. Phoenix has a clear vendetta against Mr. Drake." But Zara was prepared. "My personal history with Kingston doesn't negate the facts presented here, and I'm not the only one with a story to tell." As if on cue, Dr. Carter burst into the room, slightly out of breath. "I hope I'm not too late. I have my own testimony to add to these proceedings." Kingston, seeing the walls closing in, made a desperate lunge for the door. But security, alerted by an anonymous tip, was already in place to block his escape. In the midst of the chaos, Jasmine Reynolds stood up, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the pandemonium around her. "I think it's time I revealed my true role in all of this. I've been gathering evidence on both Kingston and Victoria for months, under the direction of a third party." The revelations came fast and furious after that. The board, presented with irrefutable evidence of Kingston's misdeeds, voted unanimously to remove him from his position. Zara, riding the wave of her victory, turned to Victoria. And as for you, your betrayal hasn't gone unnoticed. Did you really think you could play both sides and come out on top? Victoria's composure finally cracked, her carefully crafted mask slipping to reveal the desperation beneath. But before she could mount a defense, the boardroom doors swung open once more. Harrison Ashcroft, Victoria's father and the company's founder, strode in, his presence immediately commanding the room's attention. His voice, deep and authoritative, cut through the chaos. I believe it's time to put our house in order, don't you think? The tension in the boardroom was palpable as Harrison Ashcroft strode in, his commanding presence immediately silencing the chaos that had erupted moments before. All eyes turned to the patriarch of the Ashcroft family, a man whose reputation preceded him. I believe it's time to put our house in order, don't you think? Harrison's voice carried a weight that demanded attention. Zara Phoenix, still reeling from the revelations and confrontations of the past hour, found herself caught off guard by Harrison's unexpected appearance. She watched, wide-eyed, as he took control of the meeting with the ease of a seasoned conductor orchestrating a symphony. Miss Phoenix, Harrison began, turning to face her. I've been aware of your history and your capabilities for quite some time. In fact, I've been silently rooting for you since the day you stepped into this building. Zara's surprise was evident, but before she could respond, Harrison shifted his attention to his daughter, Victoria. The look of disappointment on his face spoke volumes. Victoria, I expected better from you. Your short-sighted machinations have not only jeopardized this company, but have also betrayed the trust of a valuable asset. With a heavy sigh, he continued, I'm removing you from your position, effective immediately. Victoria's face drained of color, her usual composure crumbling as the weight of her father's words sank in. She opened her mouth to protest, but a raised hand from Harrison silenced her. Kingston Drake, who had been watching the proceedings with a mixture of shock and growing dread, suddenly found himself the center of attention as Harrison turned to address him. Mr. Drake, your actions have been nothing short of reprehensible. However, your expertise is still valuable to this company. You will continue to work here, but under new management and with strict oversight. Kingston's jaw clenched, but he nodded stiffly, recognizing the precariousness of his position. At that moment, the boardroom doors opened once more, and Atlas and Orion entered. The twins' presence seemed to lighten the atmosphere, their youthful energy a stark contrast to the tension that had filled the room moments before. Harrison's face softened as he regarded the boys. I must say, I'm thoroughly impressed by your abilities. Your contributions to uncovering the truth have been invaluable. As the twins beamed with pride, Dr. Jasmine Reynolds stepped forward, clearing her throat. If I may, I'd like to explain my role in all of this. All eyes turned to her as she revealed her position as Harrison's secret informant, providing him with crucial information that had helped shape the events leading to this moment. From his place near the back of the room, Dr. Carter couldn't help but smile proudly at Zara. His protege had not only survived but thrived, carrying his legacy forward in ways he could never have imagined. Harrison's voice cut through the murmurs that had begun to fill the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it's time for a change in leadership. I am officially appointing Dr. Zara Phoenix as the CEO of our newly merged company. A stunned silence fell over the room, followed by a smattering of applause that grew in intensity. Zara stood, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of triumph and disbelief. As the meeting adjourned, Kingston was escorted to his new office, a much smaller space that reflected his diminished status within the company. The humiliation was evident on his face as he realized the full extent of his fall from grace. Atlas and Orion rushed to embrace their mother, their faces alight with joy and understanding. For the first time, they truly grasped the magnitude of their mother's journey and the sacrifices she had made for them. As the dust began to settle, Harrison pulled Zara aside to discuss his vision for the future of the company. Dr. Phoenix, I believe that with your leadership and innovative spirit, we can revolutionize the medical technology industry. I'm excited to see where you'll take us. The scene shifted, showing a montage of the months and years that followed. Zara was seen leading breakthrough after breakthrough, her name becoming synonymous with cutting-edge medical technology. Kingston, though initially resentful, gradually found a grudging respect for Zara's leadership as he worked on projects under her direct supervision. At a prestigious medical conference, Atlas and Orion took the stage, confidently presenting their own innovations to a captivated audience. Their mother watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. As the sun began to set on another successful day, Zara stood in her spacious office, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. The view was remarkably similar to the one she had admired on her first day back in the city, but everything else had changed. She turned as her assistant announced the arrival of her team for a meeting. As they filed in, Zara couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought them all to this point. Kingston entered last, his demeanor a mix of resignation and determination. Zara took her place at the head of the table, a confident smile playing on her lips. She looked around at the assembled faces, some old enemies, some new allies, all now part of her team. "Let's make medical history together," she began, her voice filled with purpose. "Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy, but making them your subordinate."